So right. Hello.
Hello. Here we are live on the Backpack Show.
God, you
Welcome to
look
the
good. Have you
special
done something to your hair?
holiday edition.
It
No,
looks
but I was
really
thinking about getting a nose job.
good.
People don't get as talked about anymore when they do that, but
No, just reduce the acreage. I could see where that'd be an
yeah.
issue. Yeah. When
So
people slam the
listen,
door in your face, it must really hurt.
it's not as pleasant. So we have thriller author Robbie Bach today. I can't even talk in the mask. Who's written the book, The Wilkes
Author of The Wilkes Insurrection. It's a very
Insurrection?
timely, like contemporary thriller. And even though he wrote it a few years ago, like somehow it's perfect for right now. So it's gonna be
It's
crazy.
going to
But
be
he
huge.
also led the team that created the Microsoft Xbox. So we'll have to talk about that. Lots of geeky stuff to talk about.
I'm going to nerd the crap out on Xbox stuff for a little while, so everybody stay tuned. So Robbie Bach's on the show today.
Hi everyone, Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
What a honker, Brogan, says Cody.
Jeez, Cody.
Deb's
So then I
like,
just had a
"Right."
realization that when I put
You're
that
taking it off.
earphone on, I am. Oh, I had to go so quick.
What costume, Chloe? This is how I look.
It's how we look normally. Look, I got to do one thing.
Your parents came. They're on time. They're not wearing anything
My
strange
parents are
that I
here.
know of.
My biological father and his wife.
So the downfall of this costume in particular is you can't see, like on Zoom, but those go all the way up.
We can't see. The downfall of my costume is I can't see or
you can't breathe. Yeah.
So
well, as our guest so astutely pointed out, you chose your own costume. So you chose where you could neither see nor hear nor breathe.
I shouldn't have even said I had an important job because he's like, well, you chose the costume. And I was like, oh.
For sure. You look like one of those guys that twirls the signs.
Oh,
like, come here and get a cheap knockoff cell phone like that.
Well, Maleficent, we have to talk Xbox. He was at the beginning of Xbox. That was a crazy time. I said Robbie Bach, and I can't help myself. Before we talk Wilkes Insurrection, we have to talk Xbox. Welcome to the show, by the way. Hello.
Hey, how are you guys?
You have a perfect costume for today. You look like professional executive that was forced to wake up very early for a show he's never heard of.
To talk about your first novel.
Right. So we definitely want to talk thriller, but so start us off. I mean, that's Ballmer time, right? That's not Gates time. And you were told we're going to do a games division as well as entertainment. Is that?
No, actually, it was Bill was still the CEO when we started.
Okay.
And Steve was, well, what was Steve's title? He was chief operating officer. He was running the worldwide sales force. So, I mean, it was Steve and Bill. But Bill was deeply involved from the very beginning. In fact, Xbox got started in 1999 with Bill reviewing a number of garage shop groups inside the company that were thinking about a game console. And there were 2 or 3 groups, and there was a little bit of a technical bake-off with Bill as the chief judge. And he selected a technical approach, which the team promptly ultimately decided not to use. But that's the way these things play out. But that all started in 1999, which is just, crazy.
It's crazy that it's that far back. I don't want to mess up this too badly. So the OS on that time frame, it wasn't like Wince or anything, right? It wasn't the CE edition of Windows. You had a very special Xbox edition that you put in, right?
Well, that's what started the whole discussion. The original technical plan was essentially Windows to be the operating system for Xbox, but a slightly modified version of Windows that would run in the living room.
Right.
And of course, if you're a video game person at that time, having a general purpose operating system was the last thing you wanted. And it created a bunch of requirements for the hardware, a bunch of complexity, So as the team started to explore a real plan, the real plan became use DirectX, which was a very small subset of Windows that was directly applicable to gaming, and some security code from Windows NT, and a few small other things, and create our own operating system. And that created that Bill was actually not happy with that when we started to pursue that plan. We had to have a special meeting just to debate that topic, and that was sort of an epic step in the process. But yeah, the original Xbox had its own operating system. I mean, it had little components. 30. It was we called it afterwards the Valentine's Day Massacre. It started with Bill, trotting into the room late, slamming his hand on the phone and yelling some profanities at us. And that led to a 3-hour typical Microsoft meeting, which was sort of a massive all hands on debate about what was right and what we should do and why certain things were stupid and other things were smart. And in the end of the day, at the end of that meeting, Bill and Steve said, "Okay, do it your way. We're with you." And to their credit, they were incredibly supportive all through this process. Really amazingly supportive. But
it sounds like it with just 1 or 2 lapses.
Yeah, well, that one, I'm going forward. They were not supportive going into that meeting. Let me just be clear. But going forward, they were super supportive.
So this was a while ago. This is 20-ish years ago. We're at the 20th anniversary of the Xbox now. The landscape changed so dramatically. So I'm just wondering, I want to know, you were tasked with, it's your whole P&L, it's your whole business. You've got to come back and give me this many million or whatever, sell me this many units and all that. But on the one hand, if you're trying to envision this, you're selling boxes. Oh, are you though? Or are you selling IP? Or are you selling, is the game more important than the box? Having Halo as your exclusive, that sort of a thing, which I was a Halo guy, and that there was only one device for me for 20 years because that was where I could play it. So what do you think you got right way back then that maybe has changed or otherwise? And what do you feel like if they put you back in the role today, how crazy different would it be for you?
Well, I think the thing we got right, we got a couple of long-term trends right. So people forget, in 1999, when we were speccing Xbox, broadband did not exist. It was just barely getting started. And in fact, many people, there was a long debate at the beginning of Xbox about whether we should include a 56K modem in the product. Because people were afraid nobody would be able to get online. So the idea that we were going to bet on broadband and bet on online gaming, we got right. And we were super early, right at the cusp of when it was possible to actually execute on that. And that was super powerful. The other sort of trend we got right was social. Xbox Live, you can make a pretty compelling argument. It was our first social network. This was before MySpace, way before Facebook. And the idea that, look, you people were doing text messaging was social media. And so people were, the idea that you could get online, play other people, build a community, and talk to each other was pretty revolutionary. And so we got a lot of things like that right. The thing we didn't get right at the beginning was really understanding the business dynamics of what was going on in the industry, right? We thought about it as, well, our product, our box is going to be faster and better so we can sell it for more money. No, that's actually not the way the industry works. The industry works, people buy the hardware because they have to, and what they really care about is the software. And so the fact that we tried to sell Xbox for $399 was Sony was selling for $299, that was never going to work. And as a result, we had to lower our price, match Sony, and we lost, I don't know, it depends on how you do the accounting, somewhere between $5 and $7 billion in 4 years.
That's all.
That's really painful. With Xbox 360, the next generation product, we got that right. We said, okay, the hardware's got to be competitively priced. We have to design it with cost in mind. It's got to be fast and great. But the thing that really has to be great is the games on top of it. And we got the game stuff pretty well dialed in Xbox, but we really got it right in Xbox 360.
Cody says some of my best memories were all my middle school buddies getting together in huge groups to play Halo all night. You're just trying to make Chris feel bad, Cody. Knock it off.
Middle school. I was already 30 by then, but yeah.
The thing people forget, people talk about Halo and multiplayer, which was amazing. They're mostly talking about Halo 2. They've forgotten the fact that Halo 1 didn't work on Xbox Live. And so when we got started, people were doing this crazy thing, LAN parties, where they would bring their TV and their Xbox to somebody's house, and they'd spread out around the house and run Ethernet cable all through the house on the floor and then play all night. And when we saw people doing that, we knew that Xbox Live was going to be a success. And that's really what got us going.
One of my favorite moments ever in a Microsoft store, because when I went into the first ever Microsoft store that I visited, I thought, oh, you poor guys. One of my favorite moments was I wandered off to this back corner and I said, what are all these boxes over here? Like, part of the store just looked a bit sloppy is what I was thinking. And he goes, oh, we're having a Halo LAN party. And I immediately was like, oh, I couldn't say a mean thing ever.
Well, the LAN parties, somebody just put in the chat that LAN parties are greater than online. And there's a part of LAN parties that are better because you can be even more social. When you win, you don't just say something online or send a message. You run into the other room and throw down your controller and make it clear who won that competition. So there's this, there's people I suspect who probably still prefer the LAN party approach.
There's the silverback gorilla moments in somebody's face. Just,
exactly. Exactly.
Oh, you boys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be careful, Kerry. There's a lot of women who play gaming today.
Oh, sure, but I've never been like in your face, mother.
Oh, like, you haven't in Word with Friends, perhaps?
Oh, well, they can't see that. That's the difference. I mean, we're playing Scrabble. I don't like flip the table and go, yeah, suck it, mom. It's not how I play. I don't know if that's how you do. But Peter Shankman actually quit on me because I was beating him so badly at Words with Friends. He what do they call it when they leave the game? He just left the game and forfeited and never played with me again. Then I was like, suck it, Shankman, every time I see him.
And I never ever played Kerry because she told that story, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna have a chance.
I'm like a journamento.
And so now I'm gonna see if I do this without breaking whole parts of my house. But now 20 years later, the Xbox One S is so tiny. It sits on the corner of my computer desk, like not a big deal. It's fast as a beast. It's mine's all digital. I don't have the media anymore. There's so many things that changed. I have one last Xbox question, and then I promise we'll talk about other things. If you came back now, what's that landscape look like to you? Do you have even that tiniest bit of excitement? Like, what if I ran the place now? Well,
first I should say the guy who runs the place is a guy named Phil Spencer, who I worked with for 20 years. Phil's awesome. So they absolutely don't need me anywhere near that place. He's incredible. If I went back now, I think the thing that's cool about Xbox now and what's going on in the video game space is how broad it has gotten. Mm-hmm. We talked earlier about women playing, but it's not just, it used to be a young guys thing. Now it's, women, it's older people, younger people, multi-generational. There are people who are, my age. I'm going to be 60 this year. They grew up playing video games.
Right.
And so it's multi-platform. Xbox Live, you can be on the PC, you can be on an Xbox, you can be, for crying out loud, on a PlayStation. You can be any place and play against other people. That to me is super exciting. And so there's just this, it used to be this sort of niche entertainment space, and there's nothing niche about it. Esports, you have, 60, 70,000 people coming to a stadium to watch other people play video games. I mean, I think it's weird, but it's amazing. And so I think the space has just fundamentally changed in really exciting ways. And in a short period of time, 20 years is not that long.
It's amazing.
Pretty exciting.
Well, I mean, there's a whole category of games that for a long time, there was a game category called casual games, and a lot of that was relegated to mobile. So Candy Crush, those sorts of things. Kerry, totally, absolutely. She's like, stop talking about video games. But there's another whole category, to your point, about older people and whatnot, called comfort games. And things like Animal Crossing is a comfort game.
Absolutely.
So there's a whole lot of that. So
we used to have this game called Zoo Tycoon.
Yes, very much in that family, and all of those tycoon kinds of games. And related to that, one of the things I think that people thought was insane was when Microsoft bought Mojang for Minecraft a handful of years ago. And now look how prescient they look, because Zuckerberg turns his company into a metaverse company, and Microsoft goes, "Oh yeah, we already had that. We had that."
Yeah, when I saw that, I went, "Whoa, $2 billion! I would have never even thought of asking Steve or Bill for $2 billion to buy a company." And that turned out to be one of the better acquisitions Microsoft's made, and in large part because they left it alone. They basically said, "You guys know what you're doing. Just do more of it." And that's been super powerful. And kudos to Phil and the team. They've done great work.
For sure.
Cody has a question. He says it's a naive question, but do you think with all the cross-platform, we could see consolidation with consoles, or maybe how do you think they'll differentiate? More exclusives, maybe?
Well, I think what's happening slowly over time, and this will accelerate, at some point the hardware just won't be something you'll think about. And the hardware may not matter. I mean, they're just shipping a new wave of consoles. They might be the last wave of consoles. Hard to know. So much of gaming is moving into the cloud, just like other entertainment experiences are, that the actual hardware you're playing on has become less and less important. And so we'll see how that plays out. But I do think there is sort of a melding of how things work. If you actually look at a PlayStation and Xbox, technically, they're actually not technically radically different. And if you compare the two of them to a PC, the levels of differences are not radical anymore either. So I think there's more work there going on, and I think more of it's going to be about the software and the software platform than it'll be about the hardware platform.
All right, I'm going to put you backstage for 60 seconds while we read some ads, and that's the last game question. I won't even talk about.
Then we're going to talk about the book, and we're going to talk about the gluten-free pasta company also, in case you were thinking he's just a video game person.
This is not just a pretty face. He's got a company, a pasta company. All right, so I've got to find the ads. Okay, hey, if you wanted an audio podcast, you could have one. Just go to castos.com. You could have a show just like this one. Boy, it sure is good. Castos.com is a really good audio podcasting hosting company. This thing is amazing. And if you want a video show like we have, what?
Easy. Castos.com is easy.
By the way, if you take the peas from the Castos website and mix them with his pasta, you can make a really nice pasta primavera. So we're sponsored by StreamYard, cbrogan.me/StreamYard. You can make a video show just as easily as we do with this and convince people to get out of bed way too early, even though they don't know who we are. Did you want a .online domain? You can get one for one whole buckaroo. That's $1 US, $1 USDC if you're a cryptocurrency person. You can get any kind of .online domain you want, except I think one of them's not available. What was it?
Your mom is .online is already taken. I know because I looked. I wanted that one.
Your mom's online.
Yeah.
So go to cbrogan.me/online. Make sure you put in the code Chris, and you will be all set.
All caps. You have to do it in all caps because I don't know.
All caps. Hey, want to stick it to demand? Screw Google. You can use Presearch.com. Presearch is a decentralized search engine. You actually have cryptocurrency, if you remember to log in, that allows you to search on things and then stake things. So some of the future of searching, Presearch.com. Oh, they're probably gone months ago, Kerry. I just like them. Presearch.com. So listen, let's grab Robbie back. We've got to ask all kinds of questions about a book. So
right.
A lot of people who run giant video game divisions and then go on to launch other companies don't tend to write thrillers. How did this get done? And you know what? Let me start with this question. Who were you reading that you said, I think I can do this? Like, who made you get there?
Yeah, I got there. I actually didn't get there because I read somebody and said, "Oh, I can do that." Because I love Nelson DeMille, and I think his writing is really strong and really incredible. And when I'm reading his books, I don't think, "Oh, that's easy. I could do that." I just fundamentally don't think that. But when I left Microsoft, I started doing a bunch of civic work, and I found myself discussing strategy with all these organizations. And so I wrote a strategy book called Xbox Revisited, which took our Xbox work in a strategy context and laid out a strategy framework that I use called the 3P framework. And I use that in all the strategy consulting work that I do, which is really fun and helpful and super easy to apply. When I wrote that book, when I got done, I said, wow, I really like writing. And then I thought about the creativity and storytelling from my video game experience and what I learned about that. And I said, well, if I want to write a second book, I could write a second nonfiction book, but that would be really boring and dull. So why don't I try fiction? And so you sort of see in the Wilkes Insurrection the merging of the creative storytelling work that I found with Xbox and that I do when I do my public speaking with my love for fiction and thrillers and the challenge it gave me as a person to say, oh, can I write dialogue? Can I do scene description? Can I figure out plot? Can I navigate the thriller dynamic to keep people on the edge of their seats while they're reading 350 pages? That to me is a real art. And it was a wonderful personal experience to do it. And, I love the outcome. I think it's great, but it was certainly challenging.
Tell people about the book. Like, what's the premise of it? It's surprisingly timely.
Yeah, the basic premise is the story starts with a commercial plane crash landing at an Air Force base in Nebraska. And our main character is Major Tamika Smith. She's in search and rescue. She rescues people from the plane, which starts us on a story where we realize that plane wasn't just a crash. It was an anarchist who has determined that it's time to bring down the U.S. government. And he's going to do it in a non-conventional way by spawning a series of attacks across the country. And the rest of the story, as they say, is about how Tamika and a group of other people, a very diverse set of people, come together to try to stop this person. And, there's an FBI agent, there's a dark web hacker, there's some cryptocurrency. You mentioned that earlier. There's some cryptocurrency work. There's some
a little plucky comic relief.
Yeah, exactly. There's a augmented reality company in the book. All of these themes come together in the context of what's going on in our country today. And I wrote
it is very diverse. Like the cast of characters is very diverse. And it's not like you were writing this in 2020 when all that was like at the forefront of everybody's mind. You were writing this several years ago. So for you, was it important that the cast of characters be that diverse and representative?
Well, it was. And when I started writing the book, I actually didn't start with a plot. I started with the characters. And I wrote 100 pages of character arcs. And so Major Tamika Smith is, biracial woman. She was an Olympic class sprinter at the Air Force Academy. That was her story. And I wrote about it. There's a guy who's a venture startup guy. I wrote about his story. There's a guy who's a dark web hacker, and I wrote about his story. And then you start to figure out how those stories come together. And, there's a theme around the beauty of diversity in our country and why that's so powerful and why that's so important. But that came together as the story evolved. And it's organically part of it being a thriller. And, I love each of my characters, but Tamika has a special place in my heart. I think she's a really cool human, but very powerful, strong character. And I will tell you, I write from a woman's perspective a lot in the book, and that's hugely challenging and interesting.
But how did you do it? Did you need to get like a consult?
No, it's interesting. I think it's, people will judge whether I got it right, obviously, when they read the book. But what you discover is I don't actually think of myself as writing from a woman's perspective. I say I'm writing from Tamika's perspective. And so I think about her character. What's her makeup? What's her psychology? Where's her head at? And I write from that perspective. And when I'm writing about Colonel Jerry Jessup, he's a military guy. So I write from his military perspective, think Top Gun type perspective. And the fact that one of them's a white guy and the other one's a biracial woman is part of the story, obviously, but that's not the way I thought about writing. And I just wrote from the emotional center of where each of those characters was.
I'm wondering how it is to carry on that same story and concept. I wonder how it is for you. One of the things in thrillers is that characters sort of have their, signature things they do and that sort of a thing. But the fear I would have, as I was listening to you, I was thinking the fear is that you accidentally not stereotype, but really over exaggerate, or you're like, you know how Tamika acts. Like, How do you keep that in check? And how do you find yourself going back to say, oh, that's dopey. Like, I don't need to go that far to make my point, etc.
Yeah, you do two things. One, you have great editors. So I worked with two editors during the development of the book, one during the first early development edit and then one later. And they help you sort of keep you grounded and did the, keep you focused on it. The second thing is, from the design, I tried really hard to make my characters human. So, and what I mean by that is, Tamika is a wonderful person, but she has faults. She struggles with things. She, when you'll see times where you say, oh, she didn't do that, did she? And that to me keeps things in balance. There isn't a superhero in this book. There are some people who do heroic things. There's some people who do bad things. There isn't a superhero in the book. And that to me is super important, because I want this to be real. I want this to be about real people experiencing the challenges we face.
That's such an important point, because the only time I ever feel dissatisfied with a book is if the character does something that seems like not in line with their philosophy or the way that they behave. Like I've read other books. We had another author on named Julie Hutchins, who writes a series of books called The Harpy, and the character is like really self-destructive. So when she makes poor decisions, you're like, well, she's self-destructive, right? But take somebody else who's more together, like Tamika. If she were to make a decision that seemed, irrational, you'd be like, wait a minute. So, but you unpack it, you give the details on these characters and the background, so you feel like when they take an action that maybe you wouldn't take, you understand why, because it's grounded in them and their experience.
Yeah, one of the hardest things, because I was so character driven, I had the backstory for characters deeply embedded in the book. And I had one of the editors said, that chapter was wonderful. It gave me the great backstory on Tamika, and you need to cut the entire chapter and summarize that in 2 sentences. And so one of the things I had to learn was the art of the backstory in 2 sentences, so that readers instantly understand who the character is and kind of where they're coming from. And the fact that I understand the deeper backstory is helpful for me as a writer, but you can't, in particular in a thriller, have there be an informational chapter. That just doesn't work. And that was really a difficult concept for me.
That's a big change too in modern movie storytelling as well. And trash the Marvel movies all we want, but for instance, Spider-Man: Homecoming, there's no bitten by a radioactive spider scene. We know that story. We already know that. There's no Uncle Ben died and he has to tell you with great power comes great responsibility. We've been there. We got it. Right. So Spider-Man: Homecoming is full action. We're in like very little like chemtrails almost behind the character, let you know something that you want to remind yourself as you're going in. That's a story. That's a character though that's been massaged in front of us since like 1962. You have 2 sentences, like you said. Right. What does that look like in typing? What does that look like when you say, all right, so when she goes to get her coffee at this Starbucks, someone's going to have to pick up a little something from her when she grabs for the coffee or whatever?
Well, what it evolved for me, and I suspect for more experienced authors, maybe they're smarter and do this more intuitively. But for me, it meant writing the full backstory and then saying, okay, how do I insert that backstory into the flow of the novel? So I literally had, probably 200 pages of material that got cut from the book.
Wow.
But that's how we live life, right? It's not like you don't barf up your life story to everybody you meet.
Exactly.
Kerry,
I am intuiting certain things about your character from your costume. So that is totally backstory right there. So
great.
So but no, that's exactly right. And so as the author, you want them to pick up things about somebody's backstory and who they are without them even thinking about it. And subconsciously, you want them to read those 2 sentences and just think they're 2 sentences and move on. But later in the story, they know that something that character did is real because of those 2 sentences. And that's an art form. That's just that's deeper than, hey, I can write a good essay. And I can write great essays. I know that. I've done that most of my life. changing from that to writing a great thriller was a great transformation.
Well, I have a different, totally unrelated question.
And this question comes from inside the big yard at Folsom County Prison.
Gluten-free pasta. How does this all
How did that connect is what she's asking. Here's a thriller author video game head. I think I'll make a pasta company.
Well, Manini's came about when I left Microsoft. I went on a sort of a multi-track set of things, one of which was this civic work I do with boys and girls clubs and other places like that. One was this writing track. And then a third was owning a small business with a very close friend of mine named Pete Higgins. And we ultimately, after looking around, bought a company called Manini's. There's 32 employees at Manini's. We make gluten-free pasta. We sell in Whole Foods. We sell in on Amazon Fresh. We sell in a lot of regional health food type stores and some general grocery stores. And for us, it's the theme of the company is great tasting food for a healthy lifestyle. So there's a commitment to producing something that is really good for you, that's nutritious, and by the way, is gluten-free and tastes good. But it's also about how do you run a small business? And which, again, I'm a learner. That's my belief is in lifelong learning. And, I worked at Microsoft. Microsoft was not a small business. Manini's is 30 people with all that implies and all the challenges it implies. And that is a great learning experience. And it turns out a really great product. We've had a lot of fun with it.
Murder at Manini's next level.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, only murders in the building. If you haven't watched that show, you got to watch it.
I have. It's so good.
That's a good show.
Stay away from gluten. The stuff will kill you. Writes itself.
So there's a sense of leaving a big company and buying a small business and sort of having that gentleman farmer experience. Oh yes, of course I have a few horses,
right.
And it's like that sort of a deal. But I feel like if you were living that business lie, 2020 probably shook that out of you. How have the last couple of years changed your values and views on working inside a small factory with 30 people? Logistics, are you hit by the supply chain problem yet? What's going on with inflation? Tell me about that.
Well, I think the last 2 years have just been, an incredibly emotional, challenging time. And as all emotional, challenging times are, it's also been a learning time. And so we have learned the power of communication. We've learned the power of taking care of each other. You work in a factory that's making food with 30 people on the floor and COVID, and you're trying to keep everybody safe because, if the pasta maker gets sick, the factory shuts down, right? That's a different environment, right? That's a different way of thinking about things. And by the way, our factory is multicultural. So communication becomes key, and figuring out how to communicate about a pandemic in 3 different languages and making sure people are all on the same page. And, workers who really rely on this for their life, and then they have to come in when they're sick, and you say, no, you don't have to come in when you're sick. We're going to pay you anyway. Please stay home and get healthy. Those are all interesting concepts and a new way of managing and driving things. And that's been a huge learning experience for us. Now, the good side of the pandemic, if you could say such a thing, was people ate more at home. And pasta turns out to be comfort food.
Right.
And so demand actually went up during the pandemic. And our challenge was keeping the facility open and keeping our employees safe.
Absolutely. Well, I have this button I have to push.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
And I think I'm going to give it to Wu-Ten Clan, Cody Wooten. He had a lot of good back and forth things in there, and he went all the way from LAN parties to Manini's pasta. So,
way to go, Cody!
You're the person that did it. Handles you 1 free apple. You just got to go buy the apple, clean it up yourself, make sure you eat it, enjoy it.
Cody and I might do some things together, so that would be fun. Some video things.
That would be fun. Oh, at work. I was like, what do you mean?
And Carol said my niece is celiac. We'll definitely tell her about your pasta.
Very
well,
cool.
See, I think what we want people to do is to sit down in front of their TV, play a video game while they eat Manini's and read a book. I think that's the perfect evening.
Multitasking.
It's the triumvirate. So we have one question we've asked every guest who's ever been here, which is what goes in your backpack? The world's changing. Everything is shifting sands. Who knows what's going to happen? But for success and insights, we can add one either physical thing or one metaphorical thing to the backpack. So in the past, it's been everything from maybe an avocado to world peace. Kerry, what's a good idea of something physical someone's added to a backpack?
Extra set of teeth.
An extra set of teeth. That's, you never know when you're going to need that.
Cumberbund, the remix mashup artist on YouTube, said that. He's also a wrestling fan. So we're like, maybe that's why? I don't know.
It's wrestling. Kerry, what's something metaphorical someone could add to their, if anything,
Kindness.
Oh,
Ariel
kindness.
Helvetica, burlesque performer, put kindness in the backpack.
So Robbie Bach, the reason that we have an Xbox and the reason we also can read the Wilkes Insurrection while chomping on delicious gluten-free pasta, what would you add to the backpack?
I would add the word and concept of perseverance. I am a giant believer that life is a learning experience. Obstacles are going to come our way. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, when an obstacle comes our way, do we see it as a barrier or do we see it as an opportunity? And perseverance is the thing that enables us to deal with all of those things. So if I'm in my survival backpack, I want to have perseverance by my side because I know that those challenges are coming my way.
I like that answer a lot. I think it's a powerful answer. So I think that out of all the different experiences you've had and, that we were able to highlight here today, I was definitely thinking about, what my grandmother would have thought about Xbox. She was subjected to the older series of like Atari and Odyssey 2 and all that. And I wonder what she'd make of what you did at the Xbox. I can tell you she was a little competitive. There was this one time where